Carlos Sainz's penalty from the Dutch Grand Prix has officially been overturned. But why did that happen, and why did it take so long? If you remember, in the Dutch Grand Prix, Carlos Sainz had an incident at the end of lap 26 with Liam Lawson. While Liam Lawson was defending on the inside, Carlos took the outside line. And in that move, there was a collision, which resulted in both of those drivers taking damage, heading back to the pits, and ending that race outside of the points. However, surprisingly to a lot of people watching, Carlos Sainz was found at fault for that incident and given a 10-second penalty alongside 2 penalty points on his license. This was a pretty dramatic situation, and we saw Carlos not only express his displeasure over the radio, but also state after the race that the FIA refused to meet with him. However, in Formula One, we have something called a right of review. This means that after a penalty is handed down, a team has the right to ask for a formal review of that decision. And in that right of review, they bring new evidence, which they hope will change the FIA's mind in the decision that they ultimately made. Williams did submit a right of review for this incident, and officially today we found out that they were successful in that right of review, and that the penalty was overturned. Basically what happens here is that the FIA now has to have a new hearing where the team is able to present new evidence. Williams in this case provided 360-degree footage of the incident from Carlos's car, and ultimately the FIA said that after reviewing that footage, as well as speaking to both teams involved, they did rescind their decision of Carlos being at fault. However, they also ultimately said that while technically this was a racing incident and neither driver was at fault, if the drivers had not collided when they did, Carlos's car would have run out of track and resulted in a collision that would have been wholly Carlos's fault. I always find it interesting to see how the FIA decides to speculate on things that didn't happen rather than focusing simply on the issues at hand. We saw a similar type of commentary from the FIA when Max Verstappen ran into George Russell a couple of races back. There's almost a level of sass that comes out of the document that I find very interesting from a governing body, but that's neither here nor there. Ultimately, what this means is that nothing can be done about the 10-second penalty that Carlos actually served during the Dutch Grand Prix. But most importantly, with this being overturned, it means 2 very important things for the rest of the season. 1, Carlos is not going to have those 2 additional penalty points on his license, which is important given that if a driver has 12 penalty points on their license within a 12-month period, they will receive a single race ban. Additionally, though, it also sets a precedent, meaning that if a situation like this was to happen again, a driver or team could reference this as a point that this is a racing incident and not something that they should be at fault for. All of that being said, it is one of the odd quirks of Formula One. Sometimes we have penalties that are later overturned that have real consequences in the race that aren't overturned in time to actually affect the standings. That's what happened here. And for you as a fan, I'm interested how much that bothers you. As Williams said in their statement, penalties and mistakes are a part of racing. And so this is something that we generally have to accept as a part of Formula One. However, when we see penalties like this change throughout the season, and when we see it take so long for those penalties to be changed, does it bother you as a fan of the sport? Does it feel like outcomes are being changed too late? Or do you feel like this is in general just a part of racing?